Welcome back. Welcome to Voluntaryist Academy. I'm your host, your professor of all things voluntarism. My name is James Cordiner. You can find my website, voluntaristacademy.com. Really go over there. It's so much fun. You can check out all the work that I've done on this channel. You can get all sorts of resources, and you can find yourself like as a member of the you can sign up for the newsletter. You can find yourself as a member. You can be a supporter of the channel. It's a wonderful website. I really am very proud of having built that website. Tonight, there's going to be a little bit of a different pace that we're going to be going at. Not a reading, as per usual. We've been covering a lot of the Men Against the State series, the expositors of individualist anarchism through the 19th into the 20th century. A couple weeks ago, we did a segment on Lysander Spooner. We covered pretty much his whole entire career in a lot of great depth. I would suggest go and check that out. But this week, as the thumbnail suggests, we're going to be talking a little bit about natural law and the defensive use of force. The reason why I'm kind of breaking out of what the channel's been doing is because my good friend, Phoenix, I know him by his real name, and he's in the chat right now. My good friend tagged me. You're going to see his name in a minute because I can't blur it out. His name's Ken, and he tagged me in a post earlier today, and it's very well thought out. And I wanted to give some of my, insights, maybe some critiques, maybe I don't agree. Who knows? We're going to find out. I don't know how long this episode's going to go on for, but it's going to be informative. It's going to be very clear and informative, and hopefully it'll get through to some people who might need to, further explore the differences between violent use of force, the initiation of harm, and the defensive use of force, which is when the boot's on your neck, getting it off. It's the FO part of the FAFO, fuck around, find out. We're going to go and look into the foe. We're going to look at the find out and see about, maybe explaining a little bit more about that. So hold on one second. All right, sweet. Let's go over to this, okay? And drop a comment in the chat, and you can find yourself up on the screen. Hopefully this is big enough font that we can make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so this is the post. And what I'm going to do, the format is going to be pretty simple. I'm just going to read the post all the way through, and then I'm going to double back and go through it and see what we can explore about this. So my friend Ken, he says, he begins, towards a thoughtful conversation on freedom, force, and the limits of self-defense. There is a lot of talk these days about freedom, but what does true freedom mean? At its core, libertarian and anarchist philosophy is based on a single core tenet: the rejection of the idea of using force, fraud, or coercion against others, broadly as a means of social control, but specifically in almost all situations and interactions. But what about defensive force, like protecting yourself or your property? Let me be clear in my views. I believe defensive force is justifiable, but only under strict conditions. Even under these conditions, it may not be prudent and therefore may not be the right choice, even though it is ethical and moral. It must be, and then he puts out some bullet points here. So let's go through these bullet points. It must be defensive in nature, meaning you may not be the initiator or aggressor of the violence. It must be proportional, meaning if someone punches you, you're not justifiable in shooting them and then disposing of their body in a wood chipper. It must be immediate. You cannot go after someone who has harmed you later and consider yourself the victim or one who is initiating defensive force or self-defense. The chief reason being because the threat is no longer clear and present. Most importantly, it must be reasonable. Using deadly force to stop a child from stepping on your prize-winning tulips is not a reasonable response. So, what do you think? Do you think that defensive force should be limited to what is reasonable and necessary? Is there a situation where more aggressive initiations of violence are warranted to respond to initiations of violence? Also, if taken to its natural and logical conclusion, what methods of defensive violence are justified under these principles? Would you find it moral and ethical if an individual lost a family member to an unjustifiable initiation of violence, tracked down the aggressor, and enslaved them as a form of restorative justice? Do these principles and guidelines justify the violence we have seen recently being used against ICE agents? Do these principles and guidelines justify the kidnapping of individuals who have violated immigration laws? Do these principles and guidelines justify the use of defensive force against individuals who claim a utilitarian monopoly on the initiation of violence within a given geographic location? What is the extent to the justification of these principles, and what is considered too far? And finally, are these principles relevant and useful in a modern society? Well, my friend Ken Phoenix, he's asked a lot of great questions in this post. So let's double back, like I said I would. All right. And let's take it right from the top. The first question, which I feel almost like as if it's rhetorical, but we'll ask it anyways. What does true individual freedom mean? Well, it could mean a lot of things, but here at Voluntaryist Academy, what I would tell you individual freedom means is that you have the right to do anything so long as those actions don't initiate harm against other living beings, or even other dead beings, for that matter, sentient beings. Okay? This is just to cover the bases here, because I'm kind of smiling and laughing about what I just said. I am not advocating for necrophilia. That is wrong. The desecration of a corpse is wrong. That is a wrongdoing. You do not have the right to do that. Okay? So, but to stick to what I'm trying to say here, true individual freedom means, okay, that's what that means. I have the right to do whatever I please, so long as those actions aren't initiating harm against other sentient beings. I personally like to talk about human beings, okay? And sorry, my little animal friends, but the dietary argument is not something that I usually get into. I know that it's wrong to claim ownership over other living beings. That's all I've got to say about that. So yeah, that's what true individual freedom means. So let's go over this next part as well. He goes on to say, at its core, libertarian and anarchist philosophy is based on one single core tenet: the rejection of the idea of using force. Full stop. It's not a rejection of the idea of using force. It's a rejection of using force, fraud, and coercion against others. It's not about the idea. It's about the action. Okay? We all have ideas. We all have thoughts all the time. But it's our conscience and our consciousness that we have to implement to use our free will to say, no, that's a bad thought. I can't be thinking like that. When somebody might, I don't know, think of your own example, but it's not necessarily or not just exclusively about an idea. It's about an action. Well, broadly as a means of social control, but specifically in almost all situations and interactions. Yeah. So I guess he goes on to kind of explain a little bit more about that, but I would take a little bit of, I would take a second and, we want to be having good balanced thoughts, right? Because your thoughts carry energy out into the universe. And of course, that includes ideas. Ideas and thoughts, we can use them as synonyms here, I guess, for the sake of the exercise. But if it were me writing this, I would have more specifically been about the actions instead of ideas. But what about defensive force? Like protecting yourself or your property? Okay. We're going to get into that because this is the big question. Protecting yourself and your property. He goes on again to clear up his own personal views that he believes that defensive force is justifiable, but only under strict conditions. I would honestly like to ask him about how the prudence and therefore it may not be the right choice, even though it is ethical and moral, because that to me sounds a little contradictory. I would say that moral and right, again, kind of synonyms for the sake of the exercise. So, yeah. Now let's go through his bullet points one by one. It must be defensive in nature, meaning you may not be the initiator or aggressor of the violence. Yeah, you should not be the aggressor of the violence. Yes, this is the whole idea of the non-aggression principle. See, the self-defense principle is the yin to the non-aggression principle's yang. Okay? Maybe I'm mixing up yin and yang because I know that's masculine and feminine. I can't place it in my head right now which one is which. Yin, yang, masculine, feminine. But we do have the masculine and feminine aspects of the principles of natural law. More specifically, what people would call non-aggression principle and self-defense principle. The non-aggression principle would be the feminine, and the self-defense principle would be the masculine. In terms of what we would, let's look at it under the umbrella of care. So, feminine would be non-aggression, meaning you care enough about other people or other beings to not aggress upon them, and self-defense would be care of the self. Of course, self is right there in the title of the principle, and that would be the masculine, meaning that you would take action in order to defend yourself. This isn't about any sort of gender roles or anything like that. This is simply deep, ancient, dare I say, occulted knowledge of the idea of the hermetic principle of gender and masculine and feminine aspects being in just about everything. Well, I mean, just about, give me a break, in everything. So this is where it comes down to, masculine and feminine, yin and yang, non-aggression and self-defense. So the first bullet point here, yes, it would have to be defensive in nature because you're not the one initiating the aggression or violence. Okay. It must be proportional, meaning if someone punches you, you are not justifiable in shooting them and then disposing of their body in a wood chipper. This one's a little bit difficult because in the context of the aggression that you are responding to, we don't know. And, but I would agree for the most part that proportionality is very important to keep in mind, because the idea of the self-defense principle is that you are looking to you are stopping the initiation of violence. You are stopping the harm from continuing. It does not mean necessarily that you are looking to end a life in a killing. Okay, because there is a difference between a killing and a murder. Murder is the unjustifiable taking of a life. Killing might be the defensive taking of a life, like the taking of a life in a defensive manner. So, I mean, if you feel like your life is in danger, then you need to do whatever it is that is within your within your power to defend yourself. I agree with proportionality, though. That's a really, really important point, because you don't, like he says, if I got punched in the face, I'm not going to whip out my sidearm and just start blasting someone. That would be stupid. That's the kind of unhinged, out of control person that is the very type of person that others look at and then use that type of person to justify the aggression of the state. It's that type of out of control person that we don't want to aspire to be. I think that's fair. Okay, so let's move on. It must be immediate. You cannot go after someone who has harmed you later and consider yourself the victim or one who is initiating defensive force or self-defense. The chief reason being because the threat is no longer clear and present. I 100% agree with this. And I'll tell you why. If, excuse me, hold on one second. So the immediacy, I got to get a cough drop. I'm sorry, guys. Hold on. I think this is my last cough drop too. I've been getting over a cold the past couple weeks. I don't bounce back like I used to. I don't know. I'm unvaxxed. I'm just saying I didn't get that fucking, just for the sake of it, that vaccine, 100% safe and effective. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I'm an individual. I made my own choices. I'm just kidding about that. 100% safe and effective. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about immediacy, and what is that? Let's just do a real quick recap. Defensive use of force. We're going through my friend's post here. He's a brilliant guy, and he's very thorough here. And like, seriously, this is great stuff. It must be immediate. I totally 100% agree with that. And here's why I agree with that. If people were able to stomach doing the dirty work of defending themselves immediately, or maybe defending another person in their vicinity who is the victim of the initiation of violence or force. Let's just actually take a second and talk about that term, the initiation of harm, or the initiation of force, or the initiation of violence. It's very simple. I can clear that up for you in like 2 sentences, or I can clear that up for you by a sentence and then a question, and then you'll get the rest from there. You get into a fight with somebody who started it. Well, there's your initiator of force there. There's the initiator of the violence. There you go. So it must be immediate and proportional. If we were able to do this, do you know how many law enforcement officers would be necessary? Do you know how many courts would be necessary? Do you know how many violent criminals would be out on the streets? A whole lot less than there actually are right now. That's the sad truth. Like I talked about in my Charlie Kirk video from like last month. The sad truth of it is people are afraid to get dirty. They're afraid to get their hands dirty. They're sometimes incapable of doing so, which is why I am intentionally pointing out that if something is happening in your vicinity, we should care enough about our other human being friends that we stop the violence from continuing. And then we ask that all important question, who started it? There he is, get him. That's it. That's it. If it were me, yeah, I can stop it myself. Maybe my wife, well, I'm there with her. I stop it for her. Maybe an old lady on the bus, There's plenty of other situations that we can go into. But yes, the immediate use of defensive force is so important and would solve so many of our social contagions that it's not even funny. And the reason why we have an out of control judicial system, we have an out of control law enforcement. So, like, the law enforcement is completely out of control. They have so much power. They have so much fucking like esteem in the public eye. The bootlickers, their mouths are filled with leather. Their breath smells like shoe polish. And the reason why is because people largely are not able to take care of business when they're right there staring it in the face. I don't know the reasons why behind that. It's mostly due to fear, and I would sympathize with that person, and I understand. I'm just simply stating a fact. If we did it ourselves immediately, how ballsy do you think some of these criminals would be? This is why I love living in New Hampshire. An armed society is a polite society. That's just kind of that's axiomatic at this point. You don't, look up the crime stats, look up violent crime stats in New Hampshire, and you tell me. Because last time I checked, New Hampshire was like third or fourth safest state based on gun crime or violent crime. Okay, so let's talk about that. There's really not much to talk about, is there? The point being that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to others around us to not be so dependent on outside bodies, institutions mostly, to take care of the dirty work for us. I know when I walk around, I'm not a violent person by nature. I couldn't be talking to you guys about this if I were. What's this? Okay, that went away. Good. I'm not a violent person by nature. It would be kind of hypocritical for me to be talking to you guys about all this stuff if I were. But I know that it's true that you go where the vulnerable people are or would be if you were that type of person that would want to initiate harm against other people. You would go where the vulnerable people are. Like schools and subways and gun-free zones all the way around. That's where the problems are. So anyways, let's, I think, move on. Maybe I have more to say about that. Most importantly, it must be reasonable. So we're talking about the defensive use of force. And we're in a portion here where we're talking about the actual like use of defensive use of force. My friend here says that most importantly, it must be reasonable. Using deadly force to stop a child from stepping on your prize-winning tulips is not a reasonable response. Okay, I would wrap that in. If it were me, I would wrap that in with proportional, reasonable, and proportional. Kind of good bedfellows here for this exercise. But I love how Ken separated those two just so he could, it seems as though so he could be just a little bit more thorough, because it's so easy to, it could be easy to be like, man, you didn't say it, whatever. But he wants to specifically point out the proportionality here of, deadly force against a child for what? Property damage? That doesn't teach anything. Maybe I don't know. It's like the old cliche of like, kid breaks window of neighbor's garage and has to go over there and learn how to replace the window or fix it or something like that. That's a much better, that's more reasonable. Maybe dad has to buy the new glass or something like that, but kid's over there next door painting the fence for the next couple weeks, and he gets gains a skill out of it or something, or gets a little bit more perspective and a little bit more respect for his neighborhood or whatever. But yeah, I would agree. It needs to be reasonable. It needs to be proportional. It needs to be immediate. That's what I think. So he asks that. He says, "So what do you think?" Well, I just responded to those 4 bullet points. Do you think that defensive force should be limited to what is reasonable and necessary? Well, here we get into a little bit of, muddy waters, and I don't want to sound like I'm contradicting all the things that I just spent like the last 15 minutes talking about, but who are we to say what is reasonable and necessary for another person in a situation? This is the most difficult part. This is the part where even it seems as though we find ourselves in a corner. Would we be dealing with a murderer, or would we be dealing with somebody who defended themselves? Say there are no witnesses. Who are we to say if it was reasonable and necessary for them to use deadly force against the aggressor? Say it's Irina Zarutska, and she turns around. Who knows? You know what I mean? Typically, though, we can rely on violent criminals to be repeat offenders, and you don't see many defensive use of force people being, repeat. They're not even an offender to begin with, but typically you don't see them. You don't see them performing actions the same way a violent criminal does. It's like a thirst, an unquenchable thirst for violence that some of these people have. It's unquenchable. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of talk about reasonable and necessary from an outside perspective, because what's reasonable and necessary for me in an aggressive situation may not be reasonable and necessary for another person in an aggressive situation. So I would just go, okay, well, I hope you're telling the truth, because if you're not, it's going to come back around and bite you in the ass. I don't want to be neighbors with a violent criminal. And if my neighbor, got into some shit downtown, I'd want to be able to trust them. Sure, there's more to talk about with that. He goes on to ask, is there a situation where more aggressive initiations of violence are warranted to respond to initiations of violence? Okay, let's break this down a little bit. The phrase initiations of violence is used twice in this question. You can't be I'm trying to understand this. It's a little bit mixed up. It doesn't seem to make sense to me a little bit here, but I'm going to do my best to kind of decipher it. Is there a situation where more aggressive initiations of violence are warranted to respond to initiations of violence? There's the key word, respond to initiations of violence. So the first time the phrase is used, that would not be an initiation of violence. That would be a respond. Therefore, it is self-defense or defensive use of force. So this question is kind of moot or void, because you can't use, it's not an initiation of violence to respond to initiation of violence, because you get it. We got some chats going up here. Cool. Also, if taken to its natural and logical conclusion, what methods of defensive violence are justified under these principles? Well, we're talking, I'm sorry, I'm chewing on my fucking lozenge as I'm talking. It's kind of rude. Thanks for being here with me, guys. Also, if taken to its natural and logical conclusion, what methods of defensive violence are justified under these principles? Well, I mean, again, this would be one of those like individual decisions type of deals. The answer to this question, in my view, is that the methods are up to the person that's required to respond to the initiation of violence. The person who's using self-defense, that's up to them. The methods are up to them. They need to be ready for whatever response would be to the outcome of the violent situation they have found themselves in. See, and that is the situation that people find themselves in, where they don't want to get their hands dirty. This is how I can understand. And this is what we need to understand when we critically look at the situation that we have found ourselves in as a whole of society. Is people are scared of having to defend themselves even after the initial violent interaction with an aggressor. We have courts. We have a judicial system. Like it or not, this is what is going on today. Those courts and that judicial system is a part of the state apparatus. And that's a crying shame. There's plenty of evidence out there that perhaps we wouldn't need them to be, run by the state, and that maybe they're more effective and they do a better job when they're not. I believe Gustav Molinari goes into this idea of public defense being instead of it being a monopoly on violence like we've got, that it would be moved into the private sector. A good example of this would be instead of the government having a monopoly on the defense of the public, say, well, we already have like security companies. So the example would be the security companies might be the first responders. Instead of them patching a call through, like if my house got broken into, right, and you have like ADT or something like that, and brings public defense to the free market. And those who are acting morally and logically and are responding quickly are the ones that are, their incentive is to act morally and logically and to respond quickly, rather than put the boot on the neck. They put the boot on the ground and they do the right thing. Otherwise, they don't have a job or their company goes under. It's a wonderful check and balance that the free market provides that a lot of people overlook, in my opinion. Oh, but you don't know what you're talking about, economics. Whatever, dude. I know enough. So, would you find it moral and ethical if an individual lost a family member to an unjustifiable initiation of violence, then tracked down the aggressor and enslaved them as a form of restorative justice? Slavery is always immoral. Period. It's never ethical. Period. So that answers that question. This is why it needs to be immediate. Okay? If the person gets away, well, we want to bring them to justice, right? But this is a part of natural law that a lot of people have a lot of trouble coping with, is that the justice isn't always carried out by the person who was wronged a decade prior. That violent criminal will reoffend. It's in their nature. It is an unquenchable thirst. Okay? When it happens, eventually they'll run into the wrong one and they will find their justice there. And when we see in the paper that person met their doom, we know that they found their justice. Oh, leave it to karma, leave it to God. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not trying to be facetious here. I'm just trying to say that this is a part of it. If we don't take care of it, if the person who's being aggressed upon is not capable of taking care of it on their own immediately, that person gets away and they will find their doom somewhere down the road. What else can we do if we want to avoid having a state that has a monopoly on violence? Or, we could have private detectives and go track that person down. But if we're not going to contradict something that was clear, that was laid out earlier in this post, and talk about immediacy, well, how much time? Where's the line? A day, a week, a month, 10 years? What kind of time frame are we looking at here? And enslave them? No, you can't enslave even somebody who's a violent criminal. The point is that we need, we need to understand that slavery is always immoral. It's never ethical, ever. And as a form of restorative justice, we're talking about justice on a scale that is not just limited to, we're talking about something that's not just on a human level. We're talking about justice on a universal level. We're talking about like God's justice here. We're talking about, natural law justice here. We have to be able to rely on karma in a way. It sucks, I know. My friend, it brings a smile to my face that I'm able to call this guy my friend. If my friends out here listening to this know another friend of mine, his name is Mark Passio. And if you listened to his show a long time ago, he had this way of saying it, that if every time you did a wrongdoing, a bee stung you, you would learn pretty quickly the difference between right and wrong. And you probably choose to stop doing wrong action because bee stings suck, but that's not how it works. Sometimes you do a wrongdoing and that sets off a chain reaction of events, and you don't learn the lesson quick enough to really, tie it back to that, kind of associate it back to that, thing you did last week when you were a shithead to somebody. It's kind of a myopic worldview, a myopic, view that people have on their own actions. And it's something that we need to break out of. The point being is that if we really apply these principles to our day-to-day life, non-aggression principle, self-defense principle, we really have an understanding of them, expand our consciousness of them, and we apply them to our everyday life, we choose right over wrong, because right is might. Right makes might. Like Richard Wetherill wrote in his brilliant book, Right Makes Might. It's not the other way around. Then perhaps we avoid many of the initiations of harm. Accidents do happen, but the purposeful initiation of harm is what we are seeking to avoid. So that way we don't ever have to face natural law justice, natural law judgment. And well, we actually, hold on, we still would, but we would get good consequences instead of the bad ones. Here's a big question, and I'm getting some chats going on here. This is great. Thank you guys for being in the chat. Okay. I hope that does that last question some justice. Okay, he goes on to ask, do these principles and guidelines justify the violence we have seen recently being used against ICE agents? Let's break this down, because ICE agents, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, right? Isn't that what it says? Isn't that what that acronym ICE means? Maybe they need to be the ones to chill out. You get it? ICE, chill. I know, I'm a wicked funny guy. Almost a pull the collar. Yeah. So this is a tough one, okay? Because we want violent criminals out of our hair. We want violent criminals off the streets. Does simply crossing an imaginary line really make someone a violent criminal? No. Does crossing that imaginary line and then going on to rape a young girl as she's jogging through her college campus or whatever make someone a violent criminal? Yes. Do we need to do something about that? Absolutely. What needs to be done? Man, it's such a tough question, because she was not only raped, but she was beaten to death. I would like to think that there's another world out there where that poor young lady was armed and ready. But that's unfortunately what reality for us is. That is not what reality for us is. So let's get back to the question here before I get into the weeds on that. I hope that inspires some thought, though, in some people. Repeat the question. Do these principles and guidelines justify the violence we have seen recently being used against ICE agents. Yeah. Yeah, it does. Because here's why. Government has a monopoly on violence, plain and simple. They don't have the right to do the things that they are doing. The way that these ICE agents are getting paid in the first place is through the confiscation of our wages, of our money, and through taxation, which is not only theft, taxation is also slavery, and these people are benefiting from slavery. So they gots to go. One way or another, they gots to go. That's the plain and simple truth of the matter. And what we're seeing here, the reason why their activity, the ICE agents' activity, has even gone up is a result, that activity increasing is a result of the incompetence of the state in the first place. And you can't help but wonder if one side is doing things so the other side can kind of jettison or propel us into a less free society. Democrats and Republicans are working in tandem to increase the amount of slavery that all of us have to suffer through. So what we're seeing here is a psyop. Whether we can really come to terms with that or not is not up to me. It's up to you to really see it for what it is. Okay? It's a psychological operation to get us to be against each other as human beings. Furthermore, the people who are innocent and who are leaving countries in South America and Central America specifically, if we wanted to just focus on them, because when we hear ICE agents, and I'm sorry to admit this, I know, but when you hear ICE agents, what do you think? Who are the first type of people that come to mind when you hear ICE agents taking people off the streets? I hate to say it, but you think of maybe, people from South America or Central America. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's what we've been kind of propagandized into thinking. And I know that it goes much more about that. But anyways, the people that they are grabbing off the streets may or may not be violent criminals already. That does not justify the state using violence against them. They are not agents of natural law. They are not carrying out God's will. That is not what is happening here. What is happening here is we are seeing the violent thugs, the mercenaries of the state, tracking down and doing ungodly things to people, picking them off. It's not good. I was trying to make the point that because of the United States activity in South America and Central America over the last, who knows how many decades, maybe even 100 years, perhaps it's possible that our actions in those other countries has increased the instability in those countries and has increased the need for these people to leave those countries in the first place. Yes, I am saying if we kept our nose out of other people's business, perhaps we wouldn't be dealing with these problems in the first place. So the state once again has created its own problems. And here we all are, once again, being pitted against each other about an immigration debate when it's the state. It's not the immigrants, it's the state. It can always be tracked back to the state. Statism is killing people. Statism is ripping families apart. Statism is blowing up children in the Middle East. Statism is what got Charlie Kirk killed. I said it before and I'll say it again. The vast majority of our problems in society can be traced back to the government sticking their nose where it doesn't belong. Plain and simple, period, the end. And when you voluntarily sign up to be an agent, when you voluntarily sign up to carry out the violence of the state, well, in one way or another, you're going to get what's coming to you. Let's move on. Do these principles and guidelines justify the kidnapping of individuals who have violated immigration laws? Again, no. It's an imaginary line. I mean, I don't know what to say. The thought of my family being a victim of one of these horrendous crimes that some of these violent people carry out. I'll be honest with everybody here. Yeah, it does make me think twice about my position on this. But I know for a fact that it's that once again, we can trace all these problems back to the state. Violent people are going to do violent things. This is when we need to be immediately responsible, response-able. Immigration laws are just another form of slavery, if we want to really get down to it. I like having my property line, okay? I don't need the government to tell me where my property line is. If somebody were to cross my personal property line, then it's up to me to take care of it. If you're down in one of the southern states, like Texas or Arizona or New Mexico, that are on the southern border, if we're even talking about the southern border, I'm in New Hampshire. I'm on the northern border. I'm more worried about these crazy Canucks up north coming down here and spreading their communism than I am about these guys coming up from the south and want to do some jobs like picking up trash. Who I work with these guys. I pick up trash for a living. That's what I do. They're the hardest workers I've ever met. I worked in kitchens before that. Hardest workers I've ever met. They're good guys too. And one of my friends got fucking busted and dragged off. He has a kid here he hasn't seen in a decade, and it's stupid. It's like, dude, just let him stay. He's not doing anything wrong. Oh, but he crossed an imaginary line. Whose imaginary line did he cross? Because my border on my property is not imaginary. Okay, I paid for my land. The government stole money to pay for the land that's not rightfully theirs. It's not rightfully theirs. Oh, but colonizers and shit. Nope. Don't even bring that up. That's not a part of this conversation. I justly own my land, my property. If someone crosses that border, I have just cause to defend myself and say, hey, get the fuck out of here. If the people on the southern border realize that, they wouldn't need to fucking worry about the federal government and what they're doing. Okay, you're a nonviolent person, come on through. Eventually, if somebody's lying for long enough, they're going to do something violent, and if we take immediate action, that violent criminal is put down in some way, shape, or form. And just for the record, I am strictly coming at this from an anarchist point of view, a voluntarist point of view. I don't claim to be 100% right about any of this, and I welcome all debate. Even though, in a way, I am right about it because I'm looking through a moral lens about this. Excuse me. Do these principles and guidelines justify the use of defensive force against individuals who claim a utilitarian monopoly on the initiation of violence within a given geographic location? Their claim is null and void. Utilitarianism is based in moral relativism. I've always been of the opinion of that. Utilitarianism is based in moral relativism. What is good for the greatest amount of people? What is it? Utilitarianism, what is good? I got a philosophy encyclopedia. Hold on. I have yet to see if utilitarianism is in the encyclopedia of philosophy that I've got. Let's see if we can zoom out a little bit on my, let's do a little manual zoom here. So utilitarianism would be somewhere here. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. Utopias. Utilitarianism. All right. Utilitarianism. Here we go. right. Try to make it so this can be read here. Very fine print. Hold on. Okay. So I'm just going to read it. You guys can see, hopefully. Maybe. All right. So let's just move on with it. All right. So we got like 3 or 4 pages here on utilitarianism, which is great. I didn't even know that this was in here. I just got this encyclopedia like not too long ago. All right. So anyways, utilitarianism can most generally be described as the doctrine which states that the rightness or wrongness of actions is determined by the goodness and badness of their consequences. This general definition can be made more precise in various ways, according to which we get various species of utilitarianism. Okay. In very many, like we have like hedonistic and ideal utilitarianism. We have egoistic and universalistic utilitarianism, act and rule utilitarianism. So let's take a little bit of look at the act and rule utilitarianism, shall we? Which is the first one here. This is getting too boring. Somebody dropped out. It's whatever, dude. You go right ahead. So act and rule utilitarianism. So because the idea that utilitarian monopoly on the initiation of violence, they do that through their rulership. The first important division is between act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. If, in the above definition, we understand actions to mean particular actions, then we are dealing with the form of utilitarianism called act utilitarianism, according to which we assess the rightness and wrongness of each individual action directly by its consequences. If, on the other hand, we understand actions in the above definition to mean sorts of actions, then we get some sort of rule utilitarianism. The rule utilitarian does not consider the consequences of each particular action, but considers the consequences of adopting some general rule, such as keep promises. He adopts the rule if the consequences of its general adoption are better than those of the adoption of some alternative rule. And we could go even more into all of this. But let's talk about utilitarianism as a descriptive ethics. It is fairly easy to show that both act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism are inconsistent with usual ideas about ethics, or what can be called the common moral consciousness. Okay, for the principles of both systems will be, in some cases, lead us to advocate courses of action which the plain man would regard as wrong. Consider, for example, the case of secret promise to a dying man. To ease his dying moments, I promise him that I will deliver a hoard of money, which he entrusts to me, to a rich and profligate relative of his. No one else knows either about the promise or the hoard. On utilitarian principles, it would appear that I should not carry out my promise. I can surely put the money to much better use by giving it, say, to a needy hospital. In this way, I would do a lot of good and no harm. I do not disappoint the man to whom I made the promise because he is dead, nor by breaking the promise do I do indirect harm by weakening men's faith in the socially useful institution of promise-making and promise-keeping. For on this occasion, no one knows about the promise. Normally, of course, an act An act utilitarian will keep a promise even when the direct results are not beneficial, because the indirect effects of sowing mistrust are so harmful. This consideration clearly does not apply in the present instance. The plain man, however, would be quite sure that the promise to the dying man should be kept. In this instance, therefore, we have a clear case in which utilitarianism is inconsistent with the way in which, for the most part, people in fact think about morality. Okay? And it's all right there in black and white. Yay. So, it goes on to even talk more and more and more. So this is the Encyclopedia of Philosophy. In my hands is a volume 7 and 8 up there on the very top shelf. Up there on the very top shelf. I got to do everything backwards. See where I'm pointing? If you're looking at the video, I got 4 volumes there. And yeah, so I hope that covers utilitarianism here. This is why I say that utilitarianism is rooted, or maybe not rooted, but utilitarianism is based in moral relativism. Okay. So, yeah, so I'm against all things morally relative. I think objective morality is more what we need to be focused on here. And I don't just think, I know morality is objective. There are, just like it or not, all you moral relativists out there, like it or not, there are just certain things that are just wrong no matter who does it. And you can't really justify it because it's wrong and you should have known better. And yeah, so I don't want to get too far in the weeds with that, but we have discovered over time that there are actions that no matter who does it, no matter how many times these actions are performed, no matter how many variations of these actions take place, they always initiate harm, and in the initiation of harm is always, there's the objective, underline that twice, objective part of this objective morality here, is always wrong. Okay? The initiation of harm is always wrong. Every time, any place, no matter who, whom? Is there an M there? I don't fucking care. Whom is doing it. Okay, so what is the extent to the justification of these principles, and what is considered too far? And are these principles relevant and useful in modern society? Maybe I lost a plot on this one I'm highlighting here. I'm going to highlight that real quick. Okay, so maybe I lost the plot on this, but I'm just going to take it upon myself to say, and this is not necessarily an answer to the question, but I'm just going to take it upon myself to say the non-aggression principle and the self-defense principle are very much useful in modern society. We will not find ourselves out of this condition of slavery if we don't begin to take a personal responsibility over our actions and to start understanding that it's up to us to use our free will to act right. Whether you are a religious person or not is of no concern to me. Everyone can see for some reason or another that these right actions are beneficial to not only yourself. If you're an egoist, that's one thing. If it's beneficial to you, or if you see it from a point of view like myself, where it's beneficial for other people to not initiate harm, and if harm is coming your way, to defend yourself, yes, these two principles, non-aggression, self-defense principles, are very much useful in modern society. They've always been useful. They all will always be useful. They are relevant they're relevant now, they're relevant in 5 minutes, as relevant as they will be in 25 years. That's just how natural law works. That's how objective morality works. That's how voluntarism works. What is the extent to the justification of these principles, and what is considered too far? Well, I think we went over that a little bit earlier. Again, if I'm not losing the plot here, what is considered too far? Well, I mean, we wouldn't want to choke out a 6-year-old who trampled through your flower garden, would we? No, that would be considered a little bit too far, in my opinion. So, the chat's been very active. I hope this clears up a little bit of stuff. I hope that this helps to inspire some critical thought, and maybe it helps with some engagement. You know, and maybe it inspires some conversation out there, and I hope this helps maybe clear up some things, or maybe it inspires some more questions and it doesn't clear up much of anything at all, which is just as good. Okay. I wanted to go back through the chat. I can't do anything about what's on the screen, but okay, we do have Phoenix in the chat. We have some returning people. R.I.P. me, Theo Lux. I'm pretty sure that they're no longer watching. And we have Chris Nelson. Chris Nelson is very cool, and so is Phoenix. Phoenix, by the way, in the chat is Ken. That is Ken. There, I outed you. I outed you. My friend Ken is Phoenix here. He wrote the post. Thank you, Ken, for being here. Chris Nelson says that penalty, i.e., see, I should have, maybe I could have stopped as these were coming in, but I did not. But the chat was very nice tonight. Let's see. Yeah, the chat was very nice tonight. Oh, and Phoenix says, "Ree." Yeah, they'll be screaming "Ree." There because they're retarded. Okay, so I wanted to do that. This has been great. It's been about 1 hour. This is going to be awesome. Get this one, in the books. And so what else we got? Oh, Phoenix said that this question was more so targeted toward my conservative and normie statist friends. I'm guessing that had to do with these ones, maybe. And that's okay. I answered them anyways, but from an anarchist perspective, I'm guessing that it had to do with the questions about ICE and immigration laws. And because those would be like, hey, now that I've kind of laid down some groundwork here about, justified use of defensive force, what do you think about these topics, huh? That's what it seems like he's laying out here. R.I.P. me says, in the authentic common law judicial system via trial by jury of one's peers, the jury has prerogative to annul unjust, immoral legislation. Yes, they do. There's a part of me that is still able to recognize maybe the need for some sort of court where people can take their grievances and try to handle them peacefully, because people have a really hard time being peaceful. I would say that if we really took in these principles that I've been laying out for the last hour of non-aggression and self-defense, then perhaps we can avoid any spicy interactions between people. But like it or not, I mean, it might be a slippery slope. It might be a slippery slope. If you let in a court, what's next? But if if these courts and perhaps even detectives and public defense, if they can be kept out of the hands of the state, and perhaps we can have them be private companies on the free market, perhaps that's a way for the checks and balances to take place. It's an idea. It's an interesting idea, I think. I myself, I don't find much need for these things because I don't stick my nose in other people's business. But then again, like I said, you just never know what's around that next corner. And, it's a conversation for another time, but I appreciate that. RIP me. And I guess that might be it. That might be it. There's one thing I got to say, is a big thank you to my friend, Phoenix, Ken, AKA Phoenix, for making this post and, performing this service and putting it out there and making it shareable and giving me the space to, and that's the other thing too, is that I also said earlier today, 12 hours ago, I said, I'm going to steal this and make a podcast out of it, to which Ken gave a big thumbs up. So, and I did that. I said I would do it and I did it. How's that for integrity? I said I did it. I said I would do it and I did it. And, thank you for, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention on this matter. It's very important that we understand these principles and that we really start applying to the best of our ability, our understanding of these principles. And it starts with non-aggression and it ends with self-defense. Like I said, masculine, feminine, yin, yang, non-aggression, self-defense. It's really important because this is these principles, they are the pipeline to freedom, a condition of freedom. Okay. A condition of anarchism, true anarchism, because if anarchy is if we're in a condition of slavery, okay, this is how I break it down. If we are in a condition of slavery, okay, and if the etymological definition of the word anarchism is without rulers, not measurement sticks, ruling class, rulers, kings, governments, what have you, then that is a descriptor of a condition as well. So anarchism is a condition. Anarchy is a condition. Okay. And anarchists, perhaps they have a bad name. Voluntarism is the philosophy that, of freedom, and it is the actions. Voluntarism is the actions to bring about that condition of anarchy, excuse me. So it's kind of like a fun thought experiment to differentiate between anarchism or anarchy and voluntarism, even though voluntarism is sort of the modern day rebrand because of all the Antifa weirdos out there who claim anarchism, and all the weirdos out there that are claiming anarchism, but they're just, kind of dupes of the state. They don't have any free thought, and they're really stupid, actually. They're actually really dumb people, and they're not doing anybody any favors by acting that way. But they claim anarchism. Anarchism has been used very derogatorily in the is that a word, derogatorily? The derogatory use of the word anarchism has been something that is really out there in the public. So in order to kind of soften the blow, the rebrand of voluntarism was kind of necessary at one point. And to be able to talk about these ideas without the knee-jerk emotional reaction that kind of anarchism kind of gives to people. So I like to kind of break it down that way, where anarchy is the opposite condition of slavery. And in order to bring about a condition that is the opposite of slavery, it's going to take some action. And voluntarism is that set of actions, is the philosophy of those actions that are going to be necessary to bring about a condition freedom, or anarchy. Those two words are synonyms too. Anarchy, freedom, same thing. Synonyms. Last but not least, I'll give the plugs out. Okay, so really, guys, I'm excited because all right. So as people know, maybe they've been listening to this. I've been trying to get like a membership thing going to like kind of help support this channel and keep it going and growing, so I can like do more and bring it more to more people. I was doing like this membership thing, and so yeah, I've been doing that, but I dropped the price down to $3 a month, and for $3 a month, you can come in. We're gonna have like a bi-weekly town hall, and we'll be able to meet up in private and kind of, talk about the subjects that I cover on the channel, talk about the material that I cover on the channel, and just kind of like have a little bit of a community, because I know how lonely it can really kind of feel out there. And I'm wicked excited to be able to do that. It's like, it makes me really happy to think about the idea that like we could have our own little group where we just, not like an echo chamber. I'm not really interested in that, but I'd like to be able to provide a space for people to be able to talk about this and get some shit off their minds, or, just make friends or whatever. But it costs money to do that. So like, if we're going to do that, if I want to do that, like we got to kind of team up and do that. Plus, it would be, anyways, before I get in the weeds on that, that's something that I'm offering. You can go to the Buy Me a Coffee and get into the Discord. We can have a chat room. We can do the bi-weekly town halls and do all that. And it'd be really cool to get to know some of you guys out there who are listening, and you get to have a little bit more private time with me, and we get to kind of bounce ideas off of each other. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And in the Discord, we can just have a chat, and we can share, we can share information in there as well. Oh yeah. And, what else was there? There's a couple of other things too. Season 14 of Autonomy just started up. And guys, like, seriously, you got to check out Autonomy. Go to the link in the show notes and click on that, and take like the primer course and really give it some serious thought. Because if you're like me, like I was a couple years ago before I took Autonomy, you might feel like a little stuck in life, maybe in your career, or maybe in some of your relationships. Maybe you feel like you could communicate better. Maybe you want more out of life. You want to be able to write your own script in life, as John Taylor Gatto might say. Well, Richard Grove has spent a lot of time fine-tuning his teaching abilities. And what he teaches is not only just like sales, but it's life skills that kind of fill in the blanks of what the public schools left out. And what you can do by filling in those blanks is your choice. Like, the sky's the limit on that. And, you get to go over to Autonomy and learn these skills, and like communication skills. Like, I sucked at communicating a couple years ago. My active listening skills were junk. And somehow I was able to turn that around by doing the integration exercises and meeting all these fine folk over there and doing the lecture series that Richard provides and everything like that. Something just clicked in my head one day, and I just wouldn't have been able to put those pieces together without this course. I want to inspire people to go over there and take it, because it's life-changing. And you would thank yourself 6 months from now, and especially right now, because it's the last time he's ever offering the lifetime enrollment. So if you really want to get the most out of it, now is the time to act. And you can go over to getautonomy.info, click the link in the show notes, and tell him James Quarterner sent you. And then the music that's provided for the show is by Brendan Daniel. And you can follow him on Instagram. You can follow me on all the social medias there, X, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. And then you check out the shirts. I don't know. There's not many shirts. I'm trying to get pumped up about the t-shirts, but if you just want to do a one-off, you can do a one-off. You can support the show in many different ways at voluntaryistacademy.com. Go over there and check it out. I think next week we'll probably return to the Men Against the State series and start, getting back into that. There's only a couple more segments of that left anyways before we switch it up and get into something else. Maybe if we were in the Discord, We could discuss what I should do next on the channel. Oh, what an idea. All right. Anyways, guys, that's it. That's all I got for tonight. That's all I got for today. And I'd like to thank you all again for tuning in and not dropping out. And I just did the Richard Grove thing. Sorry, Rich. It just came to mind. It was I admire you very much. But I was just talking about you for like 2 minutes. Anyways, I would like to remind everybody on their way out that you own yourself, period. No one else owns you, not in any sort of righteous way. You really own yourself. What I mean by that, you got to take ownership over your actions. You got to take ownership over your thoughts and your emotions. You own those things. No one else does. You own your own body. You're no one's slave. They're trying to enslave us. Let's make it harder for them. And I'd like to remind everybody, last but certainly not least, taxation is not just theft, okay? It is slavery. Try not paying it. See what happens to you. All right, guys. I'll see you guys next week. Same time, same place. And I love you all. Peace.